Hey, what is going on, everybody? It is Jay or Soar here. Back from the Indianapolis Regional Championships, and as we get closer and closer to now Chaos Rising format, I think it's time that we do a little bit of something new on the channel that I want to make a little regular following majors. So this is going to be our first ever metagame analysis, update, and kind of tier list heading after a certain major. So in this case, we just wrapped up with Indianapolis. It was a just under 2,000 entrants major, and now we're going to be heading into the Chaos Rising format with a special event in Turin, Italy next weekend, and then we have the week after that we have the North American International Championships, final event of the year. And these are both going to be in Chaos Rising. So I think it's really important. Indiana gave us a lot of information heading into the format, how things are playing out. So I want to take a little quick dive into the top results from Indy. We'll do a little bit of a tournament recap of how my event went, and then we will dive right into what we can look towards in the Chaos Rising format with both Special Red Card and Greninja and Beedrill and all that coming out. So let's get started right away. First and foremost, like I said, 2,000 entrants. We had Karis Jones walking away with the dub on the Alakazam to Dunsparce, which we'll get into the builds in a little bit. Rahul ready, second place with Crustle. And then the top 8 is basically just round out with Dragapult variants. And then a couple squeezies here into top cut with the Hydrapple and the Raging Bolt. And then like if we dig a little deeper into top 32, it's more the same. There's a few Alakazams, a lot of Dragapult, a few of these slot boxes. One Lucario ended up making it through, and then again like Hydrapple, Slop, like there's like this Tank Bufalon, Bolt. It's kind of all the same. Just a repeat of that top 8 kind of being spread out throughout the top 32. A couple Crustles, all that stuff. So let's get started with my personal run this weekend. I finished in the top 512, did not make day 2, which did sting. It was the first time I went phase 2 in about 2 years, which is definitely not my cup of tea, but hey, stuff happens. I ended up playing Alakazam. I played an interesting build with a 2-2 Rabska and a Forest to attempt to beat Dragapult as best as I could. In testing and actually at the tournament, the list was very, very good into Dragapult. Didn't really have any errors. There was like a couple games you would lose due to prizing a key piece, whether it be like a Rabska piece or Genesect or, you know, a recovery piece like Lana or Sacred Ash. But overall, the deck flowed pretty well. It's the deck that I had the most fun with in preparation in this format. I know that I didn't like Phantom Dive and I didn't like Dragapult, so I really wanted to play something other than Dragapult. And the only other deck that I was really having fun with in the format was Alakazam, so I kind of just sent it. Didn't really put much thought into it. I was just like, hey, this is what I enjoy. Let me tech it out for Pult and see what happens. I didn't play any Psyduck, so Dusknoir was kind of chopped. But overall, pretty standard build other than the Repska package. And as we look later to Karis's Jones list, it's not too far off from that. So in terms of my matches, like I played 6 Dragapults. This is like the game breakdown essentially. I played against 5 Hammers and 1 Dusknoir. All of the Hammer games that I won were pretty smooth sailing, went according to game plan. And all the Hammer games that I lost essentially came down. I remember the best of 3 came down to prizing. And then in the round 2 and round 5, I lost game 1 because they hit like a key hammer flip near the end of the game. Uh, and then I would either like have too many energy prized or I had to use like Stretcher or Lana, meaning I couldn't draw out of like Judge, and like things just got kind of messy because of hammer at heads, so I had to like scoop game 1 with maybe like 20 to 30 minutes on the clock. And then as a single prize deck, you just don't have enough time to win a best of 3. So I was able to like clutch out these wins here. And then against Dusknoir, like I said, I'm not playing Psyduck, so game 1 I kind of got double blown up. It was terrible. And then game 2 I managed to pull a win out because he prized a Duskull, and I hit like back-to-back bosses on Duskulls. So I managed to clean that game up. Round 7 against Zorark, I believe my opponent, Justin here, did not play any Disruption, no Judge, no Zerosic, no Unfair Stamp, no nothing. This matchup should be free. Except for the fact that I didn't draw playable hands both game 1 and 3. I started like Dunsparce pass, Abra pass. Nothing really happened, and my opponent had the nuts going first both games. Was able to get Darmanitan turn 2 both games, and I just didn't really stand a chance. So that unfortunately knocked me out. And then I cleaned up against a Lopunny, the Dunsparce in the last round. But Nothing too exciting. Like I said, my deck was tech for Pult, and I felt like I played as well as I could into Pult. These ties were a little unfortunate. These definitely should have been 1-0 or 2-0 wins round 2 and 5. But I mean, I only lost one best of 3, and it was due to bricking, so I can't be too upset with the archetype. I do feel like my list was perfect. Perfect metagame call. I felt like Mewtwo and Honchkrow were not going to be that big of a percentage, and that I beat basically every other deck in the format. I think Hydrapple's a free win. I think Bolt is a free win. All those like 2 prize beat sticks are free wins. And then Dragapult is the only one that's dicey, but that's why we teched so much into it, right? Like we essentially get a board of Alakazam into Dunsparce, we get this Rabsca down, we get Genesect with a tool down. We're never going to get Unfair Stamped, and then he can never take 2 because of Rabsca. He's only ever taking 1 every turn. So prize trade wise, we just kind of win. Even if we do get judged, we can afford to like pass for a couple turns because of the Rabsca. So the list, honestly, I had no complaints about the list. The only argument I was debating was playing a second copy of Air Balloon, specifically for the hammers, because a lot of them are going like Boss Genesect or Boss Fez or Boss Rapska, and just kind of leaving it in the active and hoping I don't play Wondrous Patch. So against the hammers, I definitely think double Air Balloon would have been very good. Double Handheld Fan was like cool into the Mist Energy stuff, and it was like sometimes useful against Pult, but nothing too crazy. And then like it would have been cool against Festival Lead, but the deck is kind of fake. So definitely I should have trusted my gut and played the double Air Balloon, I think. Or in the worst case, cut both handheld fans for lucky helmets to just draw a little better. But other than that, I had no real complaints about my list. I think everything was good. A lot of the top performing Rabsca builds were playing 1-1 with 3 Forest, and then you essentially get that extra space for another card. I didn't really want to risk the pricing, so I went with the 2-2. You could maybe cut down to 1-1 and just kind of hope like in best of 3 I'm going to get 2 games where my Repska isn't prized. But even with the 2-2, I felt like I was prizing a lot of the pieces, so I kind of didn't really want to risk the 1-1. But yeah, top 5-12, still I walked away with 40 points. So heading into NAIC this weekend, still chasing the invite, nothing too crazy there. Um, like I said, I felt like I played well. Unfortunate result against the Zoroark. I should have been able to phase 2 with this and have a good result, but sometimes variance is not your friend in Pokemon, so that's what it is. So that was my indie. And now focusing more on the top 8, um, we can look right away at Karis's Jones list, which is going to definitely impact the meta heading forward. As she decided to play a very standard build of Zam, except for the fact that she cut all those battle cages for Nighttime Mines. If you don't know what Nighttime Mine does, it is a card that essentially it's a stadium that when it's in play, every Terra Pokemon requires 1 more colorless to attack. So this is basically just saying F you Dragapult. Your Jet Headbutt's going to cost 2 energies, and your Phantom Dive is going to cost 3. And with a lot of Pults only playing Crispin and no like Rosas and stuff like that, and they're trying to like attach retreat into Badoo, Nighttime Mine essentially makes them very energy hungry. And if they only have 2 stadiums to bump, it's kind of hard for them every turn to hit like Crispin and bump to get a KO. And that gives Zam a lot of time where essentially if they have the Genesect on board, locking the Unfair Stamp from Dragapult, they're never getting judged because the Dragapult's going to essentially have to play Crispin every single turn to even have a chance to attack. Um, so so it is really, really smart. Similar concept to mine, like I said, like I committed 6 deck spaces to Rellor, Rellor, Rabsca, Rabsca, Forest, Forest. Whereas Karis here, she committed 6 deck spaces to 4 Nighttime Mine, Psyduck, and Elgium. And then the rest of the list is the exact same. I think we had like I had 4th Hilda over 3rd Dun, which I still think is better. And then she swapped Air Balloon for Lucky Helmet. Um, which I think moving forward, Air Balloon is definitely going to be better. I'm not sure if it's better than the helmet or the second fan. You definitely need at least 1 Air Balloon in here moving forward, because now that people know that she wasn't playing Air Balloon, they will go for the boss stall strat more. So I think it's actually needed moving forward. Um, but yeah, the mines, not sure if it's better or worse than the Rapska. It's still something I'm testing personally. I think it is better and probably the best way to play Alakazam moving forward, since it does just seem like it is the most obnoxious way for Dragapult, or rather to buy turns against Dragapult. So I do think this is definitely the way to move forward. But we will have to see interesting cards like the Algium. Not sure if this is going to continue seeing play or not. Um, it makes sense in concept when you're getting Badulok to just like slight shift them, but if they just find Stadium and then like Boss or like Crispin or something, it doesn't seem too great. So not too sure if this should be continue to be played or if this can be another spot like a Wondrous Patch or another Psychic or a Shaman or another supporter moving forward, which I'll get into later, like Ari. But that makes a lot of sense. This list was very, very good. Excellent deck building from Karis, and as you can see, like she fought against one, two, I believe it was an ID, three, four, five, six, seven Dragapults and beat all of them. Her only loss was coming to Bryce Harris here on Garchomp, who I believe, from what I overheard from a conversation from her over the weekend, was that they got Forest and like flooded the board with a bunch of Raids early, found Mist Energies early, and just started like taking KOs with Corkscrew Dive. Um, so she kind of just got ran off the board really quickly, from what I heard. I don't know if that's 100% accurate, but she had a slow start, and Garchomp Drawing Hot is one of the best decks in the format. So it doesn't happen too often, but when it does, it's pretty strong. So 15 1-1 is pretty crazy. Um, Overall, like this matchup spread's really, really impressive, and it's kind of like I was saying earlier as to why I played Zam. I just felt like the deck was super well positioned, and Karis showed that excellently. So on to second place, Rahul. This is one that's gonna kind of, with the Crustal, it's gonna make some people angry. Definitely not a fun deck to fight. Essentially, you have this Crustle that can't get hit by Pokemon EX, and then Ogerpon that can't get hit by Pokemon with abilities, and that combination kind of walls out almost everything in the format, bar a few exceptions. It has 4 Mega Kangaskhan here to start it every single game, just to be able to draw those 2 cards every turn, build up the hand size, and then once it has a fat hand, you're threatening with Crushing Hammers, you're threatening with Ice Creams, you're threatening with support cards like Ari and Zerosix, and you have Hero's Cape and like Growing Grass to just make your Crustle unkillable, essentially. Um, it's typical Crustle. At the end of the day, it was positioned very, very well for this event. Like a lot of the Pults were cutting their Dedani X. They were going down to like straight Pult builds almost, like no Dust Noirs. They were relying a lot more on, Moltres and just Phantom Dive in general. And when that's the case, they can't really hit Crustle too well. So unless the Crustle bricks, there's not much they can do about it. He was aware of the uptick in Dusknoir, so he did actually include the Psyduck here, which makes a lot of sense. He did end up beating one of these the Dunsparce EX. I'm not too sure how that game went, but he probably should have been unfavored here. But I would assume this one wasn't playing the Hero's Cape like in Prague, so you could just like kill the Dunsparce eventually, is what I think. But yeah, not much to talk about the list itself. He did innovate with the Crushing Hammers, which is something new. Definitely gives you a fighting chance into a lot of the non-playable matchups. And especially decks like Dragapult, like just running them out of energy is super, super good. So I do like this inclusion. I think this 60 is like close to perfect. Probably just Bianca's feels like the only dead card in here. I could definitely see this switching out for either like an extra stadium, like a community center maybe, or even a super potion. Could even be like a second switch, stuff like that. Um, I could even see like moving forward could be like an AZ's in Chaos Rising. So there's a couple cards you could swap this Bianca's for, but everything else looks to be pretty good. You could put it like a basic Grass just to have a better shot into Alakazam, having 2 basic energies. But other than that, it seems to make sense. Um, so like the list itself is nothing crazy, but it's kind of the impact of Crustle getting second that's going to matter. Because moving forward, as we look to Turin, is like, are we respecting Crustle? Are we not respecting Crustle? Are people going to be start playing Crustle techs or not? I think for Turin specifically, it's not a deck that we have to hyper tech for. It is a deck that is kind of it's gonna exist, but the percentage of hitting one in Turin is pretty low. And then based on how it does in Turin, we'll see towards NAIC whether or not that changes. But I don't think if I was going to Turin this weekend and I was playing a deck like Dragapult that I would worry too much about Crustle. If you hit one, like so be it, it happens. But I don't think the percentage of Crustle will be high enough that you're expecting to hit 2 to 3 to 4 in a given tournament, making the tech probably not too useful. If it's a deck like Alakazam and you're playing like Enhance Hammer Dedenne, that's a tech that's not only for Crustle, it's going to benefit you in other matchups. So I think stuff like that is worth it. But should Raging Bolt be playing Passimian or Koraidon? Probably still Koraidon. Should Pult be including other attackers like Chi-Yu and stuff like that? Like probably not, right? So I wouldn't tech for Crustle too hard, but it is notable that we have to like remember that this deck is on the map and people are looking at it now. So that's concerning. Moving forward onto Dragapult, a lot of these are going to be the hammer build. So like if I look at Kira here, This is just a straight pull, no Dunsparce, but because no Dunsparce, you have space for double Watchtower, 4 hammers. It's like very standard list. If we keep going down the list, like Alex Hamilton's running that like standard, I believe this was Andrew Hedrick's list as well with the 1/1 to done, 4 hammer, double risky. Um, and if we go to Hedrick, I believe it's the same. Yeah, like 1/1 to done, double risky, 4 hammer. It's playing the double Badoo now, just specifically for mirror. You want to go second. You want to guarantee that you get that itchy pollen off before your opponent does, and then you get those first crushing hammers and the first lilies and the first poffins and all that stuff. So that makes sense. Noah was also running a very similar build, double watchtower. Included the Moltres here over the Risky, I think is the only difference from Kira's build. It looks like it has a third stretcher. Not sure what the cut was for that stretcher, but it's a card. It's something in here. If I look at Kira's real quick, she was also on the 2 stretcher. One less stadium. Yeah, I think it was stadium for stretcher. Seems to make sense. Seems to make sense. Yeah, Risky for stretcher was the only change between those. Matthew here, similar thing. He's running the 1 Badoo, 3 Stadium, so that's where he found his cut. And he was actually playing an extra energy. He was playing 10 energy, which is notable. So not much to write home about Dragapult hammers. There was a Dunsparce build here with the EX, no hammers, no candies either. So this is actually a very interesting build just to take note of. Not one that I think will be too common, but it is interesting to see that they did well. They didn't fight against a lot of Pults, which makes sense. Because a build like this seems like it should be unfavored into Pult that is playing hammers. But has the 10 energies, has the double monkey still. This the Dun EX like exists, I guess. Moltres exists, I guess. But no hammers, no candies, only 1 Badoo. Seems unfavored into Pult Mirror. I mean, the Dun build of Pult still exists, and it's still something that we have to like keep track of. But definitely with it being slightly unfavored into the other Pults, I wouldn't worry too much about him. I'm curious as to how he actually beat the 4 Pults that he did in Swiss. But hey, maybe he just outplayed him. Or drew hotter, right? The only other Pult list to really look at here in the top cut is this list from Justin Neudorf, which plays the Dusknoir and also includes Crushing Hammers as well. So managed to basically cut out the candies, basically going under the assumption that I'm going to be Badoo locked most of the time anyways in Mirror. Might as well just like not play them and just play the Crushing Hammer for that mid game. Once the Badoo lock is over, I can like Crushing Hammer pressure the monkeys, Crushing Hammer pressure the Pults, and I can use these Dusknoirs. Essentially, like Dusknoir is kind of weak in Mirror because once they get Dragapult up, you're no longer allowed to play Duskull down. So you get that like first Dusclops or Dusknoir that you're able to build up, and then after that you can never bench this thing again. So why not have Crushing Hammers for those mid to late game to be able to compete with the other Pults that are playing the Hammers? So makes a lot of sense. Doesn't have to run Risky Ruins or Heavy Monkey since you have these Dusclops and Dusknoir to buff your damage. He went for an interesting energy split here on the 8 energy, which makes sense because you have like Dusknoir for additional damage, so you should theoretically need 1 less attack to win the game. So it's running 4-3-1. Again, doesn't need Monkey as much, so I like the 4-3 playing into that Moltres a little harder. Everything seems to make sense in this build. Has the Dawn no Judge, which moving forward with Alakazam winning, could probably assume this will change. But again, like if you're playing Dusknoir, you don't really have time to actually use Judge. A lot of the time you're winning games in 1 to 3 attacks, usually hopefully 2 when you have Dusknoir. So like 2 attacks should be enough with like 1 Dusknoir, 1 Dusclops, and 2 Phantom Dives. So you don't really have time to play Judge. Most of the time you're going to play Stamp, and that's about it. Other than that, like Hydrapple, I mean, Hydrapple is nothing crazy. Like, we've seen this list 1,000 times. Most of them vary by 1 to 3 cards. It's like whether they play the Celebi or the Bulu or the Badoo. Do they play like 1 Meowth with Noctowl Engine, or do they play 2 Meowth? Like how heavy do they want to go on the Dawn? Do they want, like, this Cypher card is pretty interesting. I've seen Cypher, I've seen Petrel. Do they want to run 4 Forest, 3 Forest, more energy, less energy, Pokepad, etc. So Hydrapple is like pretty solved at this point. It's kind of just personal preference on those last like 3 to 4 cards. So nothing too crazy here, but the deck is very strong, right? Like at the end of the day, you do have a pretty scary Pult matchup, like scary in a good way. And then you do good into like these like random like Bolt decks, right? Because you can present this like one prizer with Celebi or Bulu or like Diplin and kind of pressure the like 2 prize beat sticks in different ways that they can't really do to you. And then once you take the first 2, you go into this Hydrapple and you just start blowing things up. So I am interested as to how he beat Sarah Ledge. I guess he just took the first 2. I don't know, but overall, seems to make sense. The deck is good. People call Hydrapple a bit of a meme, but the deck is very, very powerful. And as I get into my tier list at the end of the video about Chaos Rising, you'll see I think Hydrapple is actually very powerful. And then Bolt as well. This is pretty standard. I believe this is just Ian Rob's 60. Yeah, doesn't look like any cards are different. Just looks like Ian Rob's 60 from LA. Um, I don't even think Ian Robb actually played in LA, but it was like the 60 that he posted on Metafy that a bunch of other players played in LA. I believe it got top cut in LA with at least one person. But super, super standard. I think moving forward, we might see a bigger trend into dropping one of the Raging Bolts for a second Clefairy, because that card just seems to be like you only really need one Bellowing Thunder to win a lot of games, and Full Moon Rondo is just great with Pult running around everywhere. Like, you want to just be able to have this Clefairy accessible at any time. And if you only run one, if you prize it against Pult, like, things can get dicey. So, we call it Bolt Ogerpon, but at the end of the day, it's pretty much basic box. Like, we're really relying on this Kang Ogerpon engine to get us going, and these Meows to find us, Crispin, to find us Boss, to find us, Cypher for, like, Trumpet, Stamp, E-Switch stuff. Deck is super flexible, has a pretty good Bolt matchup, or a Pult matchup, sorry. People say that it's like bad because it could just lose in like 2 to 3 turns, but at the end of the day, like you have Outplay, you have Shen Pao. I saw a lot of lists playing Hero's Cape as an additional like healing method against Pult. So, and as you can see, like this player went super, super positive into Dragapult. When you play a deck like this, the only matchups you're really scared about are these one-prize decks like Honchkrow, like Alakazam, like Festival Lead, but with Dragapult being such a big percentage, a lot of those decks, a lot of those one-prize decks are like close to unplayable, or are gonna like get kind of bullied out of the meta as of like round 2 to 3. So like here he hit a Honchkrow round 2, which sucks, but once you start getting into the later rounds, it's pretty unlikely that you're actually going to hit those matchups. So Bolt is always a good play. Very, very strong deck. I would not consider it bad by any means. And then everything else here is like more of the same. Like a lot of the Dragapult lists look the same as these. So nothing really much to go over. I do want to go over this specific Alakazam list as there were 3 of them here in top 32 from Christian Fontenot, Evan Pavelski, and Nathan Ginsberg. They actually all ran the exact same 60, which was not the Nighttime Mine build, but more of a traditional build with 4 Battle Cage, double Lucky Helmet, Shaman, and triple Boss. Not much to talk about. Just kind of wanted to mention it that 3 of them did make top 32, which is super, super impressive. Yes, it is not the Nighttime Mine build that won, but it is still notable, and we do still have to like recognize that this thing exists. So don't forget about Battle Cage Zam. And then other than that, the only like super interesting thing in here is this like Lucario got top 32. How do I see this? Lucario got top 32. Pretty standard. It's playing Lacey. I didn't even know it played this. That card can't be that great in my opinion, but and maybe it's pretty good. Double Judge, no Rocky fighting, so we're just forfeiting to Alakazam essentially. Does play that Genesect Air Balloon, has Max Bell. Pretty standard overall, nothing too crazy going on here, but Lucario is one of those decks that has been like very good and bad randomly in the format, kind of falls in and out. I don't know, deck seems strong, but not sure how strong is the question. I feel like you have a pretty decent time into Pult, but then like you get randomly like landmined by a bunch of other decks in the format. The only other thing I want to look at here is Dragapult Blaziken. This is a deck that kind of vanished after the first couple majors of the format, but Ivan here getting 18th place. I mean, pretty standard, right? We're able to play this Clefairy, we're able to play Watchtower, so maybe those cards were able to bring him over the edge in some of these top table matchups. Oh my goodness, okay. He hit 3 Hydrapples, which is gonna definitely help a lot when you're playing Blaziken. And then a bunch of basic boxes as well, which is pretty good for Blaziken. So makes sense. Pretty good. Well played for Ivan. But overall, that was Indy. if we want to look at like the now that we've like kind of finished all the regionals of this format, I do want to look into kind of the um, general trend and percentages of meta share. I put everything from LA on since LA is when we started having hammer pull. So the meta kind of changes a lot before LA. I felt like LA was kind of the time when we figured out what is actually good in this format. Everything before LA, I felt like people were playing Mickey decks just trying to figure out what was good. So if we group these up, like Dragapult is looking like a 30% meta share, seems about right. And then yeah, we have all these decks that like we have like Bolt, which is really really popular and really really good. Ogerpon Meganium, which is basically Hydropple. I don't think those are split. Yeah, so this is basically Hydropple, super good. And we also have to look at these win rates, right? So like we have Pult and Bolt 50%, which means these are great plays. And then you have decks like this, like Enzorark, who has a 5% play rate, but 45% win rate, right? So this is a deck that and Zorak is like super favorable into a deck like Dragapult, but literally cannot beat like any of the other decks in the format. It's okay into Bolts, but Hydropul's rough, Rocket's Mewtwo's rough. It's like good into Lopunny, Lucario's rough, Alakazam's rough, Festivale's rough, Garchomp's rough, Basic Box rough. Like, so that's the problem with Zorak. It's like yes, it's being played a lot, but it's pretty bad. So that's definitely worrisome. And then a deck like Rocket's Mewtwo here is in the same boat, where like it's high percentage, and I think it was a high percentage mostly from the earlier events, but it kind of fell off, and we realized that through the win rate. Same thing with Lopunny, it spiked really hard in Utrecht and LA, but then people kind of figured out how to beat it. And a lot of these decks, same thing with Starmie, like it was popular post Prague and kind of in LA, Utrecht, and Campinas, and people kind of just realized that the deck's not that great. Um, and a lot of these win rates, like Basic Box, is really high here. So this is a deck to look out for, as I was mentioning earlier. That's basically Raging Bolt, but just with more Clefairies. Um, and like most of these win rates, yeah, it's like Lily's Clefairy, that's the same thing as Basic Box. And all these other percentages are negative. So we essentially shouldn't be looking at any of those other decks below Greninja. This is like probably the bottom of the meta right here. I would cut it right there. Um, the only other thing I want to mention is from Indy. If I go to metagame, um, in Indy, overall, yeah, so Alakazam ended up having a super favorable percentage. And then like if we look at decks like Rockets, like this is now a 4% deck, and Honchkrow is like a 3.5% deck. So these decks were kind of gatekeeping Alakazam earlier in the format, because these were looking at like Mewtwo was like a 9% deck, 10% deck, like 7 on a low day. Rockets was, or Honchkrow was anywhere from 3 to 1, right? But now we've kind of like combined only being at a 6%, which is really, really good for Alakazam. And like I said, Alakazam kind of beats everything else in the format other than those two, and like Pult is like 50-50, slightly unfavored. So that's really good. So now what happens in Chaos Rising, right? Moving forward, we get the introduction of Special Red card, Disruption card that basically every deck in the format can use. It's going to slightly hurt Alakazam, right? It's going to slightly hurt, a lot of these like 2-prize beat stick decks, because they have to respect this when they're trying to get their last prize card. They can't just like have checkmate in hand, right? We get Beedrill EX, which is a deck that it's looking pretty favorable into Dragapult, just because you can set up a board that essentially is attacking for 330 damage on board, on a 310 HP Mon that like even Moltres can't knock out, right? So it's like similar to Hydropple in a way, but it's a little clunkier to get set up in a way. So we will see where Beedrill lands in NAIC. I'm going to place it on my tier list today, and we'll see kind of where that ends up. But definitely a chord and an archetype that is worth looking out for. I do have some hope for the bees, so we'll look at that in a second. And then there's Mega Greninja. I've been hyping up this card for a while. I think this card is very, very strong, and it's more of a matter of when do we figure out how to use this thing rather than is it worth figuring it out. I think the card is very strong. It's shown promise in Japan, and it's got a lot of potential. So as we get more time with the format, it might not be like perfect for Turin, and it might not be perfect for NAIC, because it like just came out. But I think down the road, and especially as like Dragapult rotates and stuff like that, this card is going to have a very, very special place in the meta. And it'll be worth looking at. So I want to jump right over to a tier list here. Just kind of my thoughts heading into Turin specifically, not specifically NAIC. I mean, it's going to be pretty similar, but specifically Turin, based on how people are deck building right now. I think this is going to be kind of a representation of the meta. I'm not going to do the meta shares. I don't think that's pretty relevant right now. I'm just going to kind of say what I believe are the best plays for the event, whether that be because they're positioned well or like they have good matchups or whatever it might be, right? Um, so first and foremost, let's get the elephant out of the room. Dragapult. This is going to be Dragapult with hammers. Um, this deck is just way too strong. It's really good. It does everything you want it to do. You take a favorable or even matchup into literally every deck in the format, except like Crustle, I guess, and like Zoroark. But even Zoroark, you can win. You have other matchups that are kind of hard, like Garchomp, but you can win. Slowking is kind of hard, but you can win. Um, like Rocket's Honchkrow can be annoying, but now with red card, it's like pretty favored. I don't know. This deck is super strong, and there's a reason that everyone is playing it. Next up, Dusknoir Dragapult. Same thing. It's already been very strong, and now it gets red card, and Dusknoir allows you to abuse red card very hard. You can put your opponent on 3 prizes when they're sitting at 4, trying to avoid the red card by popping a Curse Blast, and then you red card them, and then they kind of cry. So Dusknoir is definitely a card to be watching out for. I think if your deck has bench space and has deck space for Psyduck, it should probably be in your deck, because Dusknoir is going to be everywhere in Turin, especially Turin, because Europe loves Dragapult Dusknoir. They always have, they always will. So I think this deck's going to be very, very popular, and probably more popular than Hammers. I want to say in popularity, Dusknoir is probably going to be higher, specifically for Turin. Maybe not for NAIC, but specifically for Turin, I think Dusknoir is going to be higher. But Hammers does have a better matchup in Mirror, so I think the top players will still be playing Hammers, but I think your average Joe who doesn't enjoy flipping coins will probably be playing this Dusknoir card. Moving forward, the only other deck I'm going to be putting in the S tier is actually the Alakazam. I do think with the Nighttime Mines, a list similar to Karis's is very strong. And yes, special red card does like exist, but special red card also means that people are going to be cutting Judge. Like, I don't think for NAIC people will be making that mistake, but I do think for Turin, a lot of people are just going to like play their Dragapult list that they've been using for the last 2-3 weeks, and they're just going to switch Judge for red card, and they're going to call it a day. And Alakazam is going to be able to heavily abuse this by, um, you know, building up their hand size before going to 3. And, they can play Airy, for example, or Zerosic, or anything like that in their actual Alakazam deck to kind of snipe these unfair stamps and these red cards before they go down to 3 prize cards. Alakazam, as we can see at Champions League Osaka, which was the first event of special red card being legal in Japan back in March, Alakazam ended up winning the whole event with Airy here. So the deck is definitely good. This list was like a little sus, right? I didn't play like Dedenne, I didn't play Genesect. I like cut all those tools to be able to fit everything in here, but there's definitely a way to fit it all. And if we go statistically, Alakazam was actually the most played deck in top 32. It had 7 players playing in top 32. 2 of them were in top 8, and then like a bunch were scattered out throughout the top 32. So definitely a deck to keep your eyes out for. I think it is positioned great because its bad matchups are positioned poorly. I think your matchup into Pult is like good enough to warrant playing the deck. I think the deck is fairly simple, and if you know how to operate it and you know how to play it quickly, you should be able to win a lot of sets, especially against basically every A and B tier deck. You might have like a couple question marks against some C tier decks, and that's about it. So that's all. The only decks I'm putting in S tier. I think everything else is losing to these 2, or I guess 3. So those are like the kings of the format, in my opinion. But right under them, I'm actually putting Hydrapple. I think next to Hydrapple, I'm going to kind of put these all at the same spot. I'm going to put like Raging Bolt / like Basic all at the same area as Hydrapple. I think these 3 all accomplish the same thing. You're going to lose to Alakazam, but you do have a favored Dragapult. You have a bad Alakazam, you have a bad like Slowking, you have a bad Honchkrow, you have a bad Festival Lead, you have a bad Crustle. But the thing that Hydrapple has going for it better than these 2 is that it has a favored matchup into those 2. And it has a favorite into Crustle if it plays like Tapu Bulu and stuff. It can do better into these like basic boxes because it plays the Tapu Bulu, or it plays the Diplin, right? So you have these like 1 prize attacker options in the early game. And these like Bolt and basic box decks don't really love playing boss's orders. They'd like rather play Crispin and all this stuff to like get going. So sometimes gusting around the Bulu or gusting around the Celebi even, or even the Diplin can sometimes be annoying for these guys. So I actually have Hydrapple favored into these two, which kind of pushes the edge over these two just slightly. And I think it's good enough into Dragapult and Alakazam, or rather, like Alakazam's a loss anyways for like all of these three. But I think it's good enough into Dragapult that I would put it at third right now. I think this is the third best deck in format. You spew out energy at an insane rate. Spew out damage. You're doing like 500 damage by turn 3 consistently. The deck doesn't really mind going first or second. It operates very well doing both. Like if you go first, you have evolution priority. If you go second, you have Celebi to just like get set up, or like Badoo. You have Meowth to find lilies. You have and then you just build up your hand. You get the forest. You get the squad. You get the Meganium. You start heal dancing. You do everything right. So Hydrapple is really really good. I'm putting Basic Box a little higher than Raging Bolt for the sole fact that I just feel like these like heavier Clefairy builds with like Pearl are just slightly better than having an extra Raging Bolt and like more colors in your deck. I think these are very very strong at dealing with Dragapult, and I think they have with the Lily's Pearl at least it gives you a fighting chance into Hydrapple, and like these other two prize beat stick decks. You're like slightly weaker into a couple like tankier decks. In the format like Mega Greninja, or like a Hero's Cape like Lopunny or something like that. But you can add tech attackers to make those winnable, so it's not too bad. Um, is there any other deck I'm going to be putting in the A tier? Well, we can't forget about these other Dragapult variants. I do think I'm actually going to put the Dunsparce like down here. I actually don't think the Dunsparce is that good. Um, and when I say the Dunsparce, this means like no hammers is essentially like Rare Candy, the Dunsparce EX, maybe even Hero's Cape. Kind of like a 2/1 to Dunsparce. This deck just kind of like doesn't really do much that these other ones don't do better. I would almost always just play the Hammer Pult instead of these like candy builds. Your mirror is just so bad, and the Dunsparce EX doesn't really accomplish much that like these can't already do into these like basic box decks. So I don't think this the Dunsparce build is that good. If you like it and if it's what you're comfortable with and what you're practiced with, go for it. But if you think that um, if you're like comfortable with switching and you're like willing to experiment, just try the standard one. The standard one with hammers, it's like way better. As someone who like this was my favorite Dragapult variant when it came out, I really enjoyed this. I've learned to accept that it's just worse than the other ones. Um, Blaziken is in a very interesting spot this weekend. Now with red card being a thing, like um you do have like benefit, like even more benefit to not being on a Crispin simulator, right? A lot of these other Dragapult decks are like stuck in the mid to late game where like I have to play Crispin every turn. They get buffed by being able to play red cards, so it's like, oh, I can disrupt and like get my attacker. What Blaziken can do on top of that is like not only can you disrupt someone with red card and charge your Dragapult up with Blaziken, but you can also like play boss, right? So you get like almost 3 supporters per turn, which is really really appealing. The fire coverage from Blaziken is really nice into these Hydrapple and these basic box decks. Um, and at the end of the day, like with hammers flying around everywhere, if you're playing Blaziken and being able to like recover these energy from the discard, assuming you get set up early, you're pretty well off. The problem with Blaziken is always having to get set up early, right? You have to rely on these candies. You're getting item locked by the opposing Badoo, and you have to like try to find what you need to get these Blaziken set up, which is a little scary, but the deck is very, very strong. I would actually argue it's like a little better than these two, maybe. But I'll keep it like just below for now, because I think you do still have some consistency issues just because you have to run so many pieces to get this Blaziken online. And then going into the like, I don't think I'm gonna put anything else in A tier. Uh, okay. No, I'm gonna put one more deck in A tier, and that's gonna be specifically for turn, and it's gonna be Slowking. I do think Slowking right now is super under-teched for, super under-respected. There was a Slowking, I don't have the tournament pulled up, but in Lima, there was a Slowking that got top 8 going XO in Swiss. And then like literally undefeated in Swiss. And then I believe in Melbourne, there was a Slowking, yeah, that got 9th. And then in Indy, there was also a Slowking in not top 32, but like just outside of it. Yeah, 40th. So Slowking is a deck that has kind of been popping off as of late. People have been realizing that Dragapult is not playing Shaman, and Kiram turn 2 or even turn 3 before the Dragapults come online can completely just destroy a Dragapult's board. And they're not playing Rare Candy either, so the deck is very scary, specifically against Pult. And even into these like two prize decks, you have a lot of ways to like one shot them, right? Like you had like Haxorus to blow up like an Ogre Pawn, or you can like double cure him to take 4 or like 6 sometimes, and you had like a lot of interesting lines with Slowking. And now in Chaos Rising, it actually gains this new card, Metagross, which essentially allows you to do 300 damage, which is huge for this deck. It allows you to just one-shot, these big stage 2, these big basics. You one-shot a Mega Kangaskhan, one-shot, if you have like damage on it, you could like one-shot a Hydrapple. If you're running Brave Bangle, you can like get rid of Dragapults, you can get rid of Lopunnies, you can get rid of Zoroarks, all these things. So Slowking is a deck that I think for Turin specifically is very, very good. I would actually argue, I'm going to actually put it over Blaziken. I think Slowking is very powerful this weekend. Not enough people are playing Shaman in their deck. Not enough people are respecting the Slowking. And the deck with Metagross allows it to be very, 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 very consistent, since you can kind of get rid of all these junk attackers. If we, for example, look at like Luke Levy's list here from Indy, it's playing like 2 Kyurem, it's playing Haxorus, it's playing Annihilate, it's playing Armarouge. It has like all these attackers, right? And even if we go to like Jacob Eyes here, it's like Conk, Annihilate, Haxorus, Kyurem, Dudunsparce. Like you're playing all these guys to attack with, and like let me just look at like Lima's. Same thing, like Ape, Conk, Hax. It's like all these different one-ofs, right? So you're very susceptible to prizing. You're very susceptible to like if I don't hit a stretcher, if I don't hit a Sacred Ash on like a very key turn, you're like risking whiffing your attack, right? But now with this Metagross, you can essentially, like if I go see like a City League deck, or even here in the Korean League, just for an example, like you can basically run just 2 Kyurem, 2 Metagross, and that's like enough attackers for the whole game, which is pretty crazy, and it's a huge consistency boost for the deck. Um, and I think Slowking is going to pop off very hard in Turin if people aren't playing Shaman, which I believe they will not be, because not much has happened from Slowking like outside of those events, and people typically are not fast to respond. And I think they're gonna see the results from Indy, and they're gonna be like, hey, all these Dragapults are doing good with no Shaman. Let me just copy this list and run it. And I think Slowking is gonna eat those guys alive. So Slowking very, very good. I'm going to put it up here as our last A tier deck. And then running out now, like the rest of the B tiers, it's kind of just going to be decks that like function and have a place in the meta. Like they work, but they all have like a glaring weakness, right? So the first one of that is actually going to be Lopunny. I'm going to put Lopunny above Dragapult. I think Lopunny is still a great deck. At the end of the day, like you do really good into Pult. But if they know the matchup and they know how to play it, and especially with the hammers, it can get very hard. Alakazam, if they're playing Dedenne, is almost an auto loss. Hydrapple can be very scary, like they can just one-shot you. Raging Bolt can one-shot you, but it's not too bad if you play Dedenne X. Slowking, I guess, is one that if you survive turn 2 and you actually get your board set up, it's not too bad. But then you get into these like fringe matchups, and this is where Lopunny starts to struggle, right? Like you lose to Lucario, you lose to Garchomp. Festival Lead is not easy. Beedrill seems terrible. And that's like about it. Everything else is pretty good. Zoroark's like not easy. So you're kind of in this weird spot where you like do pretty good into Pult, but everything else is like pretty bad. I'm actually gonna put it lower. Yeah, Lopunny's in a weird spot. A lot of these decks are just in weird spots, right? So next we're gonna put like, let's go with Beedrill. I actually think Beedrill's pretty good. I'm gonna put Beedrill right here, actually higher than Lopunny. I think Beedrill is in this weird spot where you have a good Pult, you have a good, like a pretty good like big basics decks, and like pretty good Hydrapple and all that stuff, but you're susceptible to losing a Slowking. You can't beat Alakazam for the life of you. You're going to lose to like decks like Rockets. You're going to lose to decks like Festival Lead. Crustle, I believe, is an auto loss. I don't think they play a way to hit you. So yeah, like all these decks are like really, really bad. But like you're good into Pult and you're good into all these other two prize decks. So I think Beedrill's very good. If someone can crack a list that is very consistent and gets the job done and gets set up quickly, I don't see why Beedrill can't actually just put a hole through this format. Similarly, I'm gonna put Crustle right under there. Crustle is also in one of those weird spots where it's just like how many people are teching for me. If they're not teching for me, I just win, right? Like you're only really losing to Zam. I don't think Slowking is probably that good. Hydrapple, if they play the Bulu, is pretty bad, right? These like Honchkrow decks is pretty bad. Festival Lead can be bad. But other than that, I guess Hariyama's bad, but other than that, you're like pretty chill. Um, right under these guys, I'm gonna throw Honchkrow in here. The deck is like good and it does what it needs to do, but you like Pult is very hard. Pult is very hard. Especially now with red card, like it used to be doable if they had to just like you had to survive one stamp turn, but now you need to survive a stamp turn and a red card turn, and I just don't know if Honchkrow can successfully do that. Or like consistently do that rather. So I'm gonna put Honchkrow in this like middle ground right now. I could actually see it dropping to C, but I'm gonna put it in this middle ground here. And the only other deck I'm gonna put in B is actually Lucario Hariyama. I do think the Hariyama build is slightly better than the Dunsparce build, which is down here. Um, for the sole fact that I think Watchtower is going to be very, 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 very highly played in Turin, especially with Dusknoir being as high as it's going to be. I did say Dusknoir might be the most played deck. And a lot of these Hammers builds are even cutting the Dunsparce and going with double Watchtower instead of the Risky Ruins. Like people want to turn off, Meowth, people want to turn off Kang, people want to turn off the Dunsparce, people want to turn off everything. So I don't see why Watchtower is not going to be very popular, and the Hariyama build just kind of benefits off that, right? You get to play your own Watchtower or play Gravity Mountains. You don't rely on a colorless draw engine like the Dunsparce build. You have Hariyama to deal with Crustle. You have Hariyama to deal with a lot of these like big basics that are like 210 HP, right? So I think this Lucario Hariyama build, it did win seniors in Indianapolis. I think it is a deck that is worth considering. And I'm actually going to put it over Rockets and Lopunny. I think this deck is actually very underappreciated right now. And it's in an interesting spot, especially with Rockets Mewtwo leaving the format for the most part. Seems pretty good. All these next decks are kind of in this weird spot. They're going to be in C and D, and they're kind of just decks that are really good and they function and they do what they have to do, but they specifically suck against like one thing in specific, right? So the best of these are Festival Lead. This deck essentially wins every deck in the format or every matchup in the format, but it loses to Bricking and it loses to Dragapult. I don't think there is a single way that you can make a Festival Lead deck actually beat Dragapult. People have tried with Rabska, people have tried with Psyduck, but the more things that you put on your bench, the more convoluted and the harder it is to just play, right? Because you need so many Thwackies, you need so many Diplins on your bench. So this Festival Lead deck just like kind of starts to not function when you start to play Rabska and all this stuff on your bench. Against Slowking, you also need Shaman, you need Psyduck for Dusknoir, you need Genesect to turn off Stamp, you need this, like you need way too much. So Festival Lead's in this spot where it's like, it's really, really good. This deck is really, really, really good. Like it's broken, like in concept, right? You beat every deck in format, basically. Like I think you beat Zam as well. You beat literally every deck in format, but you have no chance of beating Dragapult. And if your goal is to win the tournament or top 64 or even top 128, you can't do that. Like you can't take a losing matchup to Pult because you will hit 4 to 5. Um, Now, if your goal is to just day 2, Festival Lead is not terrible because there is an off chance that you might only hit 3 Pults or 2 Pults, right? And if you like squeeze out a tie, or even like sometimes you can beat Pult just by like donking them, right? Like you can take double trippy turn 2 going first, and if you do that 2 games, like there you go, So the deck is not like completely unwinnable against Pult, if like you run them off the board, but for the most part, I think if you want to have a serious run at winning the tournament, I don't think Festival Lead can actually do that for you anymore. So it's kind of like at the king of C tier right now. Under that, I'm gonna put Mega Greninja. Greninja's kind of in this situation where, as someone who's been playing the deck a lot, I think you have very good matchups like across the board, but you need to build your deck in a very specific way, and we just don't know what that is yet. But I think the deck is very good. Your Pult matchup is like a little sketchy, but it's also not that terrible. It's like so weird. A lot of your matchups with Greninja are just like sketch. A lot of them are like, I'm going to win this game, but I need to draw these cards on this turn, right? And I need to play perfectly. I think Greninja is one of the hardest decks in format right now, and if you mess up a single turn, you won't feel it right away, but like 3-4 turns down the line, you're gonna realize like, oh, I pinged the wrong target, or oh, I shouldn't have pinged, or oh, I should have pinged. So Greninja is very difficult, and I think like right now it's very early in Greninja's lifespan, and we also don't know how to build it, right? So not only is it like the player's skill level on the deck is low, but also the like list is not perfect yet. So we're kind of in this limbo of like how do we play this card? So for now, I'm putting it here as it's kind of in this weird spot of like it could be here or it could be here. I don't think it's up here, but it's kind of in this like weird middle ground. So I'm gonna kind of put in this like vague C tier. I could see it going up or down. I'm happy to be wrong. I would love for Greninja to be an S tier deck. Um, I find the deck super fun and it's super cool, and I have a guide out about it. So if you're willing to learn more about Mega Greninja, go on in the description. There's a link to my Metafy, and you will see I do have a guide to Mega Greninja with my own deck list for Turin and NAIC and matchup explanations and all that. So feel free to check that out. But I really do hope Mega Greninja ends up being better than it is. For right now, I have it right here. Um, but I could see it going up. I think it just needs a little bit more time of the format being out. Come the beginning of next season, once we have a whole summer to kind of learn the deck, I think it's going to be in a good spot. The only other deck I'm going to put in here is Cynthia's Garchomp. I think Garchomp is a deck that actually I'm going to put Zoroark and Garchomp kind of in the same spot. These decks both have a way to like they're both very good against Dragapult. They force Dragapult to draw a lot. Um, and basically like a lot of the time Pult is going to whiff at some point and they're just going to like win the game. But they have the chronic weakness of being weak to grass, right? So Hydrapple becomes close to unwinnable, and all of these like big basics decks become very difficult. Beedrill's very difficult. Crustle is almost unwinnable. Festivalead is unwinnable. Like there's just way too many grass decks in the format that it's so hard for these decks to like go through 14 rounds without hitting four landmines, right? Like you're just gonna play 14 rounds, and it's like almost guaranteed that you're gonna hit 1 to 2 grass decks, and there's not much you could do about it. But in the world where like you only hit Dragapult, then like these decks are up here, like literally, they're so good. But it's just the meta is too wide, and there's too many people playing these like quote unquote like bad to mid tier decks, that these decks are just non-playable. I think Garchomp is slightly better since you have a slightly better Alakazam matchup. You have a slightly better Slowking matchup. You have a slightly better Crustle matchup if you play the um, what's it called? If you play the Relicanth. You have a better Lopunny matchup. You have like a lot of better matchups across the board. You have better Lucario. Like everything across the board is just like slightly better. So I'd actually put Garchomp here. I'm like almost willing to put Zoroark down here. Low key. I think I will. This deck kind of just like doesn't do anything. I don't know. It's so like good, but it's so bad. It's like similar to Garchomp, but then you just like lose to all these other things. Mega Lucario to Dunsparce, I'm gonna put here. It's like not terrible, but I just think Watchtower is like everywhere. If Watchtower is not that popular in Turin, I will actually put this like higher than Hariyama. But if Watchtower is popular, I'm gonna put it like down here. For that reason, I'll put it like just above Festivalead. That seems accurate. Um, Not much to say about it. It just draws a lot of cards, but you're like pretty bad into Alakazam. And then if these guys are playing Watchtower, you're just like unplayable. So yeah, it's like around here. Last deck I'm going to throw in here is Rocket Mewtwo. This deck sucks buns, and I'm glad people finally realize how bad it is. It, like, in theory is good, right? Like, you have a unlosable Alakazam, right? Like, you 100-0 them, assuming you don't prize Articuno. And then Dragapult is, like, kind of fine. Dragapult Dusknoir is not kind of fine, though, because they're going to pop your Articuno, they're going to red card you, they're going to kill, they're going to, like, boss Clefairy, they're going to kill Clefairy, Mimikyu, and Articuno, and, like, red card you, and then you're going to have, like, a board of nothing. So Dusknoir is, like, not that good. Straight Pult, though, is, like, pretty fine. You can actually, like, steal games here. I think this match is pretty good. And, like, everything else just kind of feels like you don't really win. You kind of just, like, do nothing. You can beat Crustle if you play the Kangaskhan, but, like, most of these matchups, you're just losing. It's like the one benefit you have going for you is, like, your Dragapult matchup is, like, okay, and then your Zam matchup is free. And everything else, I feel like you're unfavored. And on top of all that, even in the favorable matchups, your deck doesn't function. The deck is super inconsistent, has a lot of consistency issues. Sometimes you just don't even get to play the game. You don't find basics, you don't find Spite Ups, you don't find energy, you don't find Ariana, you don't find, Secret Box. Like, you're just, like, not doing anything. So the deck really struggles to get off of its feet, and I just don't think it's good at all. So, yeah, that's, like, where I stand. This is my tier list heading into specifically Turin. NAIC, this will change for sure because we're gonna have the results from Turin on like Monday, and then from there we'll kind of see, are people respecting Slow King? Are people, building Alakazam differently? How are people building Dragapult? Are any of these other like fringe mid-tier decks like having a rise in popularity? So once we kind of take a look at that data from Turin, we'll be able to create a more educated guess going into New Orleans. But for now, this is what I have going into Turin. If you guys are looking for any sort of coaching or metagame preparation for your upcoming major event like NAIC, I do coaching on Metafy, so my link is down in the description. Feel free to message me on there. I can explain to you. I do free coaching consultations if you want to see, if I'm right for you, and if not, I have paid sessions as well that we can just get right into the action. I can help you with either learning a specific matchup, or if you're just wanting to edit your deck list, for locals, for regionals, for any sort of goal that you have. And we can also go over general improvement tips like sequencing, deck building, anything like that. So, um, you know, that's my meta game and analysis from Indy and heading into Turin. So I will catch you guys again next week after Turin once we get the new data and kind of see where we're trending going into NAIC. But thank you all so much for watching. Make sure to drop a like, comment, and subscribe. Always helps out the channel. And make sure to follow me on Twitter, as that's where I put all of my updates regarding any sort of Metafy guides I may maybe coming out with, any sort of new videos, anything like that. Everything's on my Twitter. So make sure to follow me there, and I will catch you guys in the next video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Peace.